Hello everyone and welcome. I'm excited to share with you a new product today called Deep Edge dies. These dies are a little bit thicker than ordinary paper craft dies. They come in a bunch of different designs that I've created for the season. We're going to be using the Enchanting snow globe today for our first project. I'm going to apply some ink to the background of this card. So I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock using broken china in Distress Oxide. I'm going to apply some ink here and there. And then I'm going to switch to faded denim, and I'm going to apply it in overlapping circular motions here and there as well. I just want to add a little bit of color here and there, maybe put some of this Distress Oxide and Wilted Violet on, maybe on one side. I just want to get a little bit of color on there and then spritz it with water, create a little bit of texture for the background. Now I'm going to quick cut out the background with this dome portion of the Enchanting Snow Globe die, and you can see that it fits on a standard A2 size note card. I'm going to apply a little bit of the faded denim Distress Oxide ink to my craft mat, and we're going to use that to create some background as well. We'll spritz it with water, and I added a little bit of the broken china down below, and I'm just going to dab a piece into that wet ink and pick some of it up. You'll see it gets kind of sloppy looking, but I'm just creating some background here. I'm going to get droplets here and there, kind of overlap things. I want it to look a little bit messy. And then I'm going to use my heat gun just to dry everything off. Now I know things are good and dry once that paper has flattened out. You can see it flattening there as I'm adding the heat to it. And I'm just going to repeat the process. There's a little bit more ink left on this craft sheet, so I'm just going to turn that paper over and dab into it again. I want to get the little bits and pieces that are still left on the craft mat, and I'll dry it again, layering that so that there's a layer of sort of smooth ink and then a layer of speckles on top of it. It just creates some nice aesthetic texture when you're looking at the card. Now I have all the pieces that are included in the Enchanting Snow Globe, and I'm going to be cutting all of those out. So I've laid them out here, and we're going to cut it out to assemble the snow globe. You can see that that's the snow at the bottom of the snow globe, and then there's various bits and pieces that you're going to be applying. I'll go ahead and put that background onto my Bayou note card. This is this color called Bayou. Just apply a little bit of glue, and I'll get that adhered down onto the card, so that's drying while we work on the rest of the project. Now there are multiple pieces to put together like a puzzle when you're assembling this Enchanting Snow Globe, and I've cut them out in various shades of cardstock with different patterns on them and different textures. The base of the snow globe I've just cut out of a dark brown piece of paper. I'm going to put that down for my base so I kind of know where I'm going to start at the bottom. I apply a little bit of glue to the back of my snow globe. This is the one I made a custom background out of with some ink. And I cut the snow out of just some basic white cardstock. That's just going to give me a nice base of snow at the bottom. I made it a little bit more interesting with the rest of the pieces though. I kind of went through all the different little scraps that I usually save after projects, and I used those to create the house and the trees and the windows that are used on the rest of the card. So here is just a piece of aqua paper that has a little texture to it that I used for one of the trees. I had another piece that I used for a different tree. I think it's interesting to create a little bit of difference as you're putting everything together. And the house was some really cool paper. It was brown with some orange polka dots on it. I'm going to use that. It doesn't have to look exactly like wood or painted wood or a house even. You just need to put some texture down there and think of it as a collage. I'll put some glue down. That's going to be where the door and the window go. So I'm going to carefully pick those up. They're pretty tiny, and just stick them into place. This adds a little bit more detail to the card. I'm going to just use a color that's contrasting to the house color that I use so that it'll show up. Now I want the roof to stand out just a little bit, so I'm going to cut off a tiny thin piece of foam mounting tape, and I'm going to use that underneath the roof to make it stick up just slightly so it's above the house and also sticking out from the card a bit. I'm going to put that on. Just want to make it a size so that you can't see it underneath the roof. Pull off the liner and then stick it down. It's just going to be hovering sort of above the house, and it'll add a little bit of dimension there. Now we're going to switch back to our regular old craft dies now. I'm going to use the Memory Box Warm Christmas Wishes, just cut out of plain white cardstock, And I'm going to put that just above the house. I'm just going to put a few drops of glue here and there, just kind of take my time, and every ½ inch or so I'm going to stick some glue on there, and that'll be enough to hold things down. I'm going to tilt it just a little bit, almost like there's a little bit of smoke coming out of the chimney, hovering in the air up above the house. This is a super easy card to make. You can really change up the elements and color scheme and make it your own. Our next project is the Arctic Penguin. This, again, is a deep edge die. You can cut out multiple layers of paper and fabric or thicker materials at the same time, and it comes with all the elements you need to make that penguin. I've laid it out here with a bunch of different types of cardstock and pattern papers. You can see the feet and the beak are on one die, so I have the orange and the yellow next to each other. And I'm going to start with the white body. Now I've cut everything out. So now it's just a matter of assembling things in the right order. I'm going to be putting the body together. You got to get the flippers. And I suggest laying these things out a little bit before you get started, just so you can get it in the right spot. Now I do have to create a background for this card, so I'm going to rub faded denim Distress Oxide ink onto my craft mat, add a little bit of water, you can see it bead up there, and I'm going to use that to create some background just on a piece of plain white cardstock. Just going to put the white side down and start picking up some of that ink. You can flip it over to see where things are at. Sometimes you want a lot on there, sometimes you want a little bit. I think I'm going to go with a little bit less this time. I don't want it too saturated because I like all those little drops of color. So I'm going to dry it off, and then I'm going to pick up some of the leftover ink that's on there, layering it up so there's lots of crunchy looking ink on there. It looks all splattery and messy, but once you get the card assembled, it'll look great. Now this is a quick process. I'm just going to rub that faded denim ink onto the craft sheet again, give it another squirt just to activate it, make it wet, and I'll plop my background piece down onto it again so I can get yet another layer. You can keep doing this until you're happy with how things look. Sometimes you might want a little bit more ink, sometimes you might want a little bit less. I'm going to leave it a little bit undone so there's still some white space opened up here because I just want a lot of texture to show on this particular card that I'm making. Make sure it's good and dry. I'm just using my heat gun. And I'm going to be using the wrapped scallop stitch die from Open Studio to cut this out. I'm going to add a little bit of Distress Oxide ink in Wilted Violet. Some of that original background splatter will show through and some of it will sort of fade away and the purple will take over. I just want to make it a little bit uneven. I'm trying not to get it too perfect on here. I want a lot of texture to show through, so I'm just adding it here and there around the border. And then to complement that, I'm going to add some Distress Oxide ink and faded denim. That's going to fill in some of the spots, but still let some of that original droplet background show through. So I want to make sure that everything's filled in, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Now there's no one way to put this penguin together. I think that, as I suggested, you should lay this out first just to see where you want his flippers to go and what his scarf should look like, etc. But go ahead and start putting things down. I'm going to put the body down first. That's the black portion. And then I'm going to put his hat on. So the hat has the top of the hat and it also has a rim at the bottom of the hat. You want to put that on in the right order so that things layer up correctly. I'm going to go ahead and throw the body on now. That's just the big white piece. And you want to get it more or less in the center of that black piece so that things are symmetrical on both sides. And there's that little hat band that I mentioned. That needs to go on top of the hat and on top of the body so that things look like they're in the right order. So it's really up to you how you want to put the flippers on. You could put them behind the body or in front of the body. I put them in front of the body for this one. And the other thing that you can do is make the flippers raise up or raise down. So for my project, I made his flippers go down, but you could make them raise up. You would just switch the sides so that they're pointing up, and then he could be holding something or he could be cheering or whatever effect you wanted to create. I'm going to stick a couple of dots down. That's where my eyes are going to go. Now the eyes that are included are pretty small, so I use my picker-upper tool to help me put things in place. And then he has some little cheek spots there too, so I'm using my tool to help stick those down as well. You'll notice that I'm starting to add a little bit of color and a little bit of texture in here. The hat was different textures, kind of the same color scheme. And then the scarf, I wanted to put even more texture on there. Scarf comes with two different pieces, and I'm just going to lay that first piece down. And then the second little end of the scarf is going to be glued down on top. And I'm covering up his cheeks just a little bit. I'm going to put his feet down. I'm just going to slip him underneath his body. It's a little bit easier to do this than to try to put the feet down first and then put the body over it, but up to you, whatever works for you. And then there's just a few elements left to finish off the penguin. We have to put his beak on, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue right above the scarf. I want his beak to sort of be peeking over the scarf, so you're going to glue it onto the white portion, but that it's going to also land on the scarf, so it's almost like it's tucked underneath his beak. And then a little bit of glue at the top, so you can put the pom-pom on his hat up top. Now he makes a great card, but he'd also make a great ornament or a gift tag. He's super cute and super fun to put together. The next project is the Deep Edge Snow Bunny. Now he comes with lots of different parts. There's lots of room here for some creativity. You can put lots of different things together. I'm going for a look like this, and you can see that I've chosen different patterns for different portions. That's the hat. So I've cut them all out here, and it's just a matter of planning things out. I suggest cutting out all the pieces ahead of time and figuring out where they're going to go before you start assembling your card. Now I want to create another background. This one's going to be a little bit smoother. I like the other ones because they were very textury and there's lots of movement and pattern going on with all the splatter. But this one I want to be a little bit smoother. I'm going to start with Spiced Marmalade with Distress Oxide ink and color one side. And then the other side of the white cardstock, I'm going to be coloring it with Fossilized Amber Distress Oxide ink. I want to be sure that those two colors overlap in the middle. So I'm filling in the card, but as I'm getting close to the middle, I want to make sure that one color goes over the other so that it transitions nicely. I want to make sure that pretty much all the color is filled in around the edges. Don't have to worry as much about the middle because I'm going to be covering it with that snow bunny. So I'll go ahead and apply some adhesive to the back of the background, and I'm going to apply it to a persimmon note card and just get that ready. Now is the fun part. You just start sticking everything together, and you want to have things sort of in order. The tail needs to be behind the body, and the arms need to be behind the body too. So I've cut out these pieces, and I'm sticking it in the right spot. He's going to be a little bit happy with his arms up in the air. I'm going to get that all onto the body, and then just stick it in the right spot so that the rest of the bunny is ready to go. I'm going to put a little bit of glue in his middle so that I can put his stomach down, then a little bit of glue at the bottom for his feet. And it's just a matter of remembering what order you're going to be putting these things in. It's kind of like putting together a paper doll. Now, once you have the lower body in place, you're going to be working on the head. So you need to put a few drops of glue at the top of the head because you need to glue those ears down first. So I'm just putting a drop of glue and then pushing those ears into place. He can have them sticking straight up or a little bit off to the side. That's completely up to you. You have some creative license here. And then go ahead and stick the head down onto the card. It's okay if they stick up a little bit past the card. That's kind of fun. And I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the inner portion of his ear because we have to put those pink bits right inside his ear too. And those just kind of line up right alongside the head. I'm going to stick some glue down so I can put his hat on. Again, go through your stash of papers, all those little bits and pieces that you've been saving over the years. This is the time to use those up. I'll put the little pom-pom for the top of his hat at the top of the hat, and then I need to get his face glued on. So I'm going to put some glue down so that I can get his cheeks down onto the face, and I want to do his eyes next. So a few little tiny dots of glue. I'm going to use my picker-upper tool to put those in place. And I'm going to start finishing things off. There's this portion of his face that's kind of the mouth area. You put that down first, and then you stick the nose on top of that. So then it's just a matter of finishing off the rest of the card with his scarf. Now the cool thing about these deep edge dies is they'll cut through so many different materials. It works great on paper, but try it on fabric and try it on really thick cardboard and even thin metal. For the final project, we're going to be using fabric. This fabric is from Joanna Figueroa. She's a very popular quilting fabric designer, and I'm going to be using the Wonderland Snowman die for this project. Now I've pulled out the die that makes the scarf on the snowman, and I want you to look at your fabric and find the parts of the fabric that have the most going on and choose those for these small pieces like the scarf. Now, if you're not familiar, you do need to use a product called Heat and Bond or some sort of similar product to make this all happen. This is a piece of the material. It's got the glue on one side and then paper on the other. You're going to cut out a portion of that to bond onto the fabric. This is going to help you later on when you're going to be ironing it onto whatever project you want to use it on. I'm going to cut out a piece, and it needs to be a little bit smaller than the fabric, so I'm just going to cut it down here. You don't want it running off the edges. You'll see why later. But you want to just stick it on there, and you want to put it down onto the fabric. I've got it on my ironing board here along with a couple sheets of paper, and I'm just going to iron that onto the fabric. You'll just use the manufacturer's suggestions for what setting you need to put your iron on. You hold it down for 5 to 10 seconds. You don't have to hold it down for too long, but you want it to bond onto that fabric, and that's going to be the glue that you'll use to adhere that to your project. Now, once you're done, I want to try to feel it a little bit, see if there's any bubbles or areas that I missed, and you can go back and iron that, but just make sure it's good and tight on there. So I'm going to use this particular fabric. It's got sort of a tone-on-tone look. I'll use it for maybe the hat band on the snowman. So that's the portion there. You can see that I have plenty of fabric for that to happen. But the cool thing about these deep edge dies is that you can cut multiple layers of fabric at the same time. They're a little bit deeper. So instead of just a regular old craft die that works on paper, this one is good for mixed media projects or for cutting things that are a little bit thicker than normal, and it does save you some time. So I'm just going to cut up some strips of this here. This is the fabric. It's already got that Heat and Bond product on it. I'm just going to stack these up. This can cut up to 6 layers of fabric at a time. It's maybe a little bit less with the Heat and Bond on there, but give it a try. Some machines are a little bit stronger than others. My machine takes 3 layers at a time with Heat and Bond. And I want you to make sure that you're doing this in the correct way. Now, these particular deep edge dies really cut. So you're going to be putting your metal adapter plate down first. Then you're going to put your material on top of it. There, I've put 3 layers of fabric on, and I'm going to be sticking my die on top of that. The rest of the sandwich is exactly the same as what you're used to. You'll be putting your plastic cutting plate down below everything and another plastic cutting plate up above, and then you're going to stick it through the machine just like you normally would with a regular old craft die. There'll be a little bit more resistance because you have a lot of layers going through there, so it'll be a little bit tighter, but it'll go through. And then you pull it out, and here's the fun part. You get to pull all those different layers apart. You'll notice that pieces of that Heat and Bond will come out. That's okay. That's just the liner on the back of the Heat and Bond, and that's supposed to come off anyways. So here's all 3 pieces cut out at once, and you're going to go ahead and start cutting out all the other pieces. Now remember, you do want to choose portions of the fabric that have a lot of density on them, lots of design going on. Now choosing it this way is a really efficient way to use your fabric because you just use a little bit at a time. I'm going to pull out different portions, and I want to make sure that I'm using just the right parts of the fabric. So for example, the cheeks here, I'm going to find the pink portions of my fabric and just use up those little bits. It'll really stretch your fabric supplies. So cut everything out. I want to make sure that I have this all planned out before I get started. And I want to make sure that all my pieces are properly prepared. If there's any liner left on the back of the fabric, you need to peel that off. And you can see here how easy it is for it to come off. That's just waste material. That'll get pulled off to expose that shiny material. Now the shiny material is what's going to glue things onto your project. So make sure that that's all in place before you get started. The first thing I'm going to do here is put the bottom portion of the snowman onto the fabric. I just have a scrap piece of fabric here so you can see how this all goes together. Now you can make any fabric product you can think of using these deep edge dies. They just make it a lot easier to cut everything out and to really use up your fabric wisely. So here I've stuck the top of the snowman on, and I'm going to go ahead and put his hat on. You want to make sure that you're doing this all in the proper order. This is just like if you're doing this on a note card, if you're going to be making your own handmade cards. It's the same process. You're putting this on one at a time, sort of like a puzzle piece, and you have to do it in the right order so that things layer properly. Now these dies are carbon hardened steel. They cut super sharp and crisp, so the edges of each of these fabric pieces do not fray. It's important to use that heat and bond product, and that's going to help things not fray as well, but the combination of those super sharp dies and the heat and bond is going to make your project look real crisp. So continue to put the different layers on here. I've put the scarf on. You want to put the extra little bit of scarf on as well. And each time you're going to just apply some heat with your iron just for a few seconds and stick it on there. Now you'll notice on the nose, I cut out a piece of orange fabric and it had a little bit of white polka dot on there. That's okay, just adds a little bit of texture and adds to the whole handmade look of everything. Put your eyes on there and just continue to assemble everything layer by layer until you get it all put together. Now, if you have to make any modifications to the fabric elements in your project, it's super easy. You're just going to cut it. So that heat and bond almost makes that fabric behave like paper. It's stiff enough that you can just use some scissors to cut things down. So I cut down his arms here just to make sure that it fits on the little fabric swatch that I'm using. And I'm going to lay that right up against the body and iron it on. I hope you see that any fabric project is going to be a lot easier if you use these deep edge dies. I hope you'll try these out and make them your own. Until next time, thanks for joining me.